All right, so another movie I watched recently was The Cabin in the Cotton, starring Bette Davis. And honestly, this movie is probably best remembered today for one thing, the line, "I'd kiss you, but I just washed my hair." It's a great line. This is Bette Davis Eyes, the series where I watch and review every Bette Davis film on my way to becoming the most prolific reviewer of all time. But there's actually a little more to the movie than that line. The Cabin in the Cotton is set in the American South during the 1930s, and it's basically about the conflict between poor white people who work on cotton farms and the wealthy owners who control them. And interestingly, the movie barely mentions black people at all, despite being set in the South in this period, which is the Jim Crow period. Um, there are references to the racism of the poor white characters towards black people, but that's not really what the movie is about. Instead, the main focus is on the conflict between rich people and poor people. And there's one character who gets caught right in the middle of the conflict. He's from a poor background, but he gets an opportunity to work for the wealthy landowners, one of them specifically, who his father worked for before he died. And then he has to decide where his loyalties really lie. One of the things I found interesting about the movie is the acting. Bette Davis actually feels surprisingly modern. Her performance is much more naturalistic than some of the other actors. But a lot of the performers in this movie had grown up during the silent film era, and you can really see that in their performances. The male lead in particular has this very old-fashioned style of acting. He'll be standing there waiting for the camera to move in close, and then he'll suddenly make some dramatic facial expression to communicate what he's feeling, which is not bad acting, it's just acting of a different era. It's just a very different style from what we're used to today, and it's kind of connected to the technology of how they used to shoot films. You can really see the transition between silent films and the early sound era happening right in front of you. And apparently, Bette Davis absolutely hated making this movie. She later described it as one of the worst films she ever worked on. And part of the reason was the director. Apparently, he told her that she was ugly, sexless, and that nobody would ever find her attractive, which is a pretty horrible thing to tell anyone, let alone an actress who's trying to make a career, especially when you're making a movie when she's supposed to be to have a somewhat seductive role. Davis later talked about how she was supposed to be this kind of temptress, basically the woman who tries to lead the male character in the wrong direction, but ironically, her character isn't really a traditional seductress. She's basically trying to tempt the guy away from doing the right thing, or maybe being with his people or something like that. And he doesn't really fall for it. Of course, we don't need to feel bad for Bette Davis. She would go on to become one of the most famous actresses in Hollywood history. So yeah, the director's prediction that nobody would ever find her attractive didn't exactly age very well, like in a few years even. It was way out of date. The thing I found most interesting about the movie is the way that it tries to present both sides of the class conflict. The wealthy landowners aren't necessarily presented as pure villains, and the poor workers aren't necessarily presented as completely innocent either. The movie seems to be trying to say that there's corruption and wrongdoing on both sides, but I'm not completely convinced that that's the right way to look at it. If one group has most of the money, owns the land, controls the workers, and has most of the power, then they're probably going to be responsible for more of the corruption. It's one thing for poor people to steal because they're desperate. It's another thing for wealthy people with all of the power to exploit those people because they can. So I didn't really buy that part of the movie. And I think the movie sometimes tries a little too hard to make both sides look equally responsible. Like this is both sidism in like the 30s. Overall, The Cabin in the Cotton is an interesting movie, especially if you're interested in old Hollywood or the way movies were made during the transition from silent films to talking pictures. It's not a movie I'd say you absolutely have to watch, unless, of course, you're a hardcore Bette Davis fan like I am. But there are some interesting things going on with the class conflict, the acting styles, and especially, of course, Bette Davis. And of course, there's that famous line, "I'd kiss you, but I just washed my hair." I did it better that time. Not great, but better. That line has definitely had a much longer life than the movie itself. So if you've seen The Cabin in the Cotton, let me know what you thought of it. Do you think the movie was right to treat the rich and poor characters as equally responsible for the problems, or do you think the people with the money and the power deserve more of the blame? The Cabin in the Cotton, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this review, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more movie reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.